Yeah, I'm the chief processor at Archaeology South-East in Essex. I write little think pieces for the blog post, mostly on medieval literature, on Old and Middle English, such as Beowulf and Piers Plowman, and I've done Christmas carols as well, if anyone wants to check those out. But my main interest is looking at herbals and researching plants and plant names. So that's what's linking us into the 9 herb charms day, which is a recipe found in an early medieval text written in Old English. But we're going to look at this as a piece of medieval text from both a literature and an archaeology point of view. So that should be good fun. Right, so I thought I'd start by reading the instructions that accompanied the 9 herb charm as a starting point. This will give us a taste of the language we're dealing with, the plants, and the level of medical instruction that we're looking at. Right, I'm going to read everything in modern English, so don't worry about that. So here we go, right. So the instructions with the 9 herb charms start, mugwort, plantain, open to the east, lamb's cress, betony, mayweed, nettle, wild sour apple or crab apple, chervil or thyme, and fennel, old soap. Work these plants into a powder, mix the soap and waste from the apple, mix with water and ashes, take fennel, boil it and bathe it with mixtures and put the salve on. Sing the charm over each plant 3 times and over the apple in the same way. Sing the charm onto the patient, into the mouth and both ears and onto the wounds, and put more salve on. That's the so that's what we're kind of dealing with. So right, so we're going to put the charm in. So that's the instructions for the charm. So we're going to put this in context because it's a little strange in that. So early medieval texts are written in Old English. They're influenced by Latin and Greek, and this has been copied and translated, and in some cases the plant names have been translated maybe into plants that were growing in Northern Europe. Medical texts do make up quite a large amount of the surviving Old English surviving corpus, but because of how the texts were perceived in the 19th and early 20th centuries, they were left as oddities, folklore, fairy tales, and they're not taken particularly seriously, and they're not classed as actual medicine, hence why now we're doing some reassessments of maybe they can be taken a little bit more seriously. These attitudes have been reassessed in the past few decades, and the information held in these texts is slowly being looked at more seriously, though these attitudes do still get in the way. Having said that, the medical texts, in particular the Lacnunga, and the Old English Herbarium and Bull's Leech Book and Leech Book 3 offer a unique look into known medicine of the time. They show a range of sources from Greek and Latin to local knowledge and access to both pagan and Christian approaches. So what are these sources of Old English medical texts? So I'm going to, throughout this talk, I'm going to mention 3 of them. Bull's Leech Book 3, and the Lacnunga. These texts are comparable as they contain elements that are similar and seem to be at least in part copied from a similar example text. So Bull's Leech Book 1 is one of the best known medieval medical texts written in Old English. Bull's Leech Book's named after, there's a Latin signing at the end of the 2nd book. Actually says the word bald in it, which is kind of cool. It's a collection of herbal remedies written in about 880 AD in Winchester. So that's the sort of time period we're looking at. The book is organised from head down in clear and has a clear context page, unlike the other 2 texts that we're going to look at. Leech Book 3 is in the same manuscript as Bull's Leech Book, but it does not have a context page. Instead, the indication of the topic change is indicated by the word "this" at the top, which is interesting. It starts off in an orderly fashion and then sort of goes off on one in places, which is interesting. There are duplicates from Leech Book 3 and Bull's Leech Book, but Leech Book 3 has remedies that are more of a gynecological nature and uses charms as well as more medicinal cures. and it's slightly damaged. And then we have the Lacnunga, which is found in a manuscript which also contains the Old English herbarium, which is only written in Latin, unfortunately. And it is described as a collection of herb remedies, charms mainly in Old English. It's probably written in Canterbury around 970 AD, so a bit later. The Lacnunga is described as a disorganized collection of remedies. It doesn't follow any order. It's kind of like a scrapbook of things that people have just sort of written down higgledy-piggledy all over the page. It's really cool. It also contains impressive numbers of remedies that draw on folklore and magical origins. This includes the 9 herb charm and links with Norse practices as well as local. Right, so that's a very brief look at some of the background of the corpus of Old English medical texts, but I did say that I was going to look at an archaeological approach to this as well. For this approach to work, we need to look at physical evidence that also needs to be looked at. Just like looking at plant names and the recipes that appear isn't enough to complete the picture. So we're going to look at the evidence found on archaeological sites. So I picked 2 sites that were excavated and have been published, so the information is publicly available. Also, these sites have dates that match the ones from the manuscripts. So they represent different areas of England. So the 2 sites that we're going to use when we have a look at the charm itself are Southampton, which was excavated from 1998 to 2001. The site is located at the east of Southampton city centre and has got a lot of information dating from the Saxon period, which was known as Hamwick. From this study, data from both Middle Saxon contexts is being used. They were gathered by bulk sample strategies, both waterlogged samples and charred remain plants provided species. This is mostly data from about 800 AD. And the other site we're going to look at is Coppergate in York. The site from 16 to 22 Coppergate is particularly interesting case as it uses the unique conditions that biological remains were uncovered, meant that a lot of the stuff was anaerobic, so waterlogged by the site of the River Foss, meaning that the material preserved was very good. Has led to reconstructions of the environment being more detailed between the mid-9th century to the mid-11th century AD. Was excavated between 1976 and 1981 by York Archaeological Trust, and the environmental evidence was sampled by 2 main methods, general wet sieving and timber samples and bulk sieving. So for this study, both species plant species from both methods will be looked at. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the bit I'm looking forward to explaining. So part of my job, hence the goofy photo, is that I process all of the material that comes from archaeological sites, and part of my job is to use 2 of these methods. So in archaeological environmental recovery, we use two methods. A bulk flotation, which involves taking a sample of a context, usually a base fill or something that looks very charcoaly in that, and then running it through these 2 massive sieves where I have to wear these great big gloves that come all the way up to my arms. They're very sexy. And I basically get rid of all of the silt and mud, and it just leaves any organic or sort of any other residues, and that's where we'll be. And the method of flotation lets all of the seeds and insect bits and things float up and into a second mesh, which we can then look at under a microscope. So that collects things like seeds and little bones and basically environmental indicators from it. The other method is wet sieving, which is usually samples that are already wet, so they're usually in water and that, and this involves using a hose. It's really messy, and that again goes through multiple sieves, but finer ones, and then we put them under a microscope to look at it. We get littler things from that. You sometimes get pollen from it, you can get wood, seeds, tiny insects, but you must keep the material wet. So that's the method of getting environmental information from actual archaeological sites. Right, so next slide, please. Right, so we have our sources of Old English medical texts and 2 fantastic archaeological sites and a brief explanation of how the archaeology sites are going to give us information on plants. So we're going to look at the 9 herb charm and we're going to apply 2 research questions to them. Can these plants be grown in a local climate of England in the early medieval period? So the plants that are mentioned, so the 9 herbs basically. And 2, are the texts and the plants in the Lacnunga part of the early medieval medical handbook or oddities to be enjoyed? Right, so next slide, please. So these are the 9 herbs. The approach, looking at the archaeology, can we say these remedies were actually used by looking at them? So we're going to break down each plant as the names are given, if I've got enough time, and we're going to look at the possible translations and other uses and other places that these particular herbs appear in the selected literature, and if there's any known medical or medicinal uses for the plant. This table demonstrates the first issues of this study, which is translation. So you look at the Old English stuff on the left-hand side of the screen, some of the words are going to be, you can sort of see where the modern English comes from. Some of them are completely different. So yeah, and so my translation is slightly different to the one in the middle, which was an older one that was used. But you get the picture anyway. Right, so let's start with the first plant. So next slide, please, which is mugwort. So the charm starts with, well, plant number 1. Have thou in mind, mugwort, what thou dost reveal, what thou dost establish at mighty denunction. Anna is my name, oldest of herbs. Thou art strong against thee and against 30. Thou art strong against venom and against onflight. Thou art strong against evil, she that farest throughout the land. So we're dealing with quite poetic-y sort of language as well, which is nice. We're going to see lots of the herbs are dressed like this, and they're dressed like this in the options. They're kind of like given almost like options in a fight. So you kind of pick your fighter against the disease, which is quite metaphoric, which is kind of cool. Hence the word onflight, which means that's the disease, which is nice. So etymologically, mug and wort means Martian root. So it could mean any plant on that one, but this one's the one that seems to come up every time. It's used to flavour drinks and beer, has been found in Iron Age context, so it does go back. It's from Britain, so it's good. In modern herbal medicine, it is used as a treatment for fevers and stomach aches and coughs and colds. It can be used as an essential oil, and it apparently has effects on blood pressure, and can be used as antifungal and antioxidant. As well as the 9 herb charm, it is used in a couple of salves from the Lacnunga. In the Leech Book, it's used for mistiness of the eyes, for worms and footache and swelling and travelling. And in Leech Book 3, it's used for, again, sore feet. It does not appear on any of our archaeology sites, which is a little disappointing to start with, but this is a good example that the old adage that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And mugwort, though part of the daisy family, is classed as a weed. It's quite invasive. It's one of those plants that like sunny but poor soil. So it's very possible it's one of those plants that in like the 8th century, you know, it's found at the side of a field or something. So it's easy to access. All right, next plant, please. So the next one is broadleaf plantain, or way broad. And thou way broad there. And thou way broad, mother of herbs, from eastwards open, mighty within. Over 3 have chariots rumbled, over thee and queens ridden, over thee and brides cried out, over thee bulls snorted, All dost then have withstand, and thus does confound. So thou withstand venom and onflight, and that evil thing from forest throughout the land. This one's really metaphoric, so this one's very poetic. The bit about chariots and queens and brides is that this plant is mostly found by roadsides, and I think it still is. I'm pretty certain that on my little route down to my allotment, I'm pretty certain that this grows at the side of the road. And it would have been very familiar to the peoples at the time because of this. It's very, the plant is really, the leaves are massive on these things as well. And as the etymology says, it comes from broad or breadth, so they are big leaves. In modern folk medicine, they are used as, the leaves are used in skin poultice, on wounds, for sores and insect stings. The root is used for fever and respiratory infections, as well as the 9 herb charm in the Lacnunga. It's used for, which is one of my favourite things that shows up, infirmity of all organs, which kind of sounds like it's paracetamol or something, but it's probably not. Weakness, flying bedding, and a stubborn stitch as well, which might be useful. In Leech Book 1, it's used for nosebleeds, footache. It's loads of recipes of footache. Must be one of those things. Cleansing wounds, snake bites, typhus, dog bites, all sorts. In Leech Book 3, it's used for remedies for headaches and again sore feet. What's interesting about this one is that it was found in Coppergate in the form of charred seeds. It's very common weed, again probably because it was on the side of a road or the side of the river or something like that. It's edible, and they think it was probably also used as salad greens. So, and it grows pretty much all year as well. It's another one of these weed plants. It likes poor soil and is found on roadsides. So very so we can access it. It's very accessible. Right, next plant, please. All right, this is where the weird old English words appear. So, Stoon is a herb named, on stone hath she grown. I've spelled wrong, interesting. He standeth against venom, pain she assaulteth. So Stoon is a odd name. It's probably to do with the look of the plant, stiff, hard like a stone. It might be that it's grown near on stone or grows in between stones or something. It's also probably a type of corn salad, possibly bittercress, hairy bittercress, lamb cress, which is a type of brassica. This one's a bit of an odd one because the etymology doesn't quite line up, but this one's the best guess that we've got for it. Lamb's cress is another salad green. It's edible plant. It grows in damp places, this one. It was found in Coppergate as a form of fruit, so which was found through wet sieving in a waterlogged contest. So this does link up with found around stone and damp places, so on a riverside building, that sort of thing. In other texts, it's not used very, it doesn't appear very often. In Leech Book 1, it's used for chronic disorder of the head, which I love the translation of that, it's fantastic, and infirmity of all organs. So it possibly could be, that might be a bit of a guess, but it's probably, it's an educated guess for that one. Okay, next slide, please. This one, however, Bethany is a plant mentioned by Pliny, so it has Roman medicinal links as part of the Lacnaceae family, which includes many Mediterranean herbs. So the charm calls it, see if I can get this right, Atulov. So, and it's also known as, so I've called it Bethany on this one, but it's also known as hedge nettle, purple bethany, wood bethany, bishop's wort, and bishop's wort, which is another word that does show up in some of the charms. So it's probably the same plant. Modern herbalists prescribe bethany to treat anxiety, heartburn, high blood pressure, migraines. It can be used for ointments for cuts and sores. There are loads, and I mean loads of uses in the Old English lexicon, but it could be used to be a link to translation for Latin medical remedies as well. So this might be where the copying comes in. Uses in the Lacnunga, there's actually less than there is in the other two because of how the Lacnunga is more Old Englishy, actual English plants, things that were grown and written here, and not copied as much as the other two. But there's still quite a few for that. There's it's a mix. So you got charms for cattle, green salve, infirmity of all organs, loin ache, neck tumour, earache, pain inside, pain in foot, and yeah, there's loads on it. The uses in Leech Book 3 include include a charm against the devil, pain in shoulders, drink against the devil, against the temptations of the devil, being overlooked, yellow disease, swollen eyes, and something called wood heart as well. So that was quite interesting. And from Ball's Leech Book, it's used for actually quite a lot of, this one's the one that's probably directly from a Latin text. So these ones are slightly more, I'd say, sensible things. Headache, eye ache, earache, swelling of the neck, toothache, shoulder pain, foot ache, thigh ache, shingles, inflammation, stomach ache. The list goes on. It's used pretty much in everything. It's one of those plants that I think probably Kedfile uses it or something. It's one of those. Interestingly, because it's a Mediterranean herb, it's not found on any of our test sites. But again, this might be the absence of evidence thing. That it's an interesting one that sometimes we don't find the more Mediterranean stuff, but that might be because they are being grown in maybe monastic environments in proper herb gardens and not just ones that are found at the side of the road. Okay, next slide, please. So our next plant is mayweed / chamomile. I can't remember which way around I said the translation was, but I've used both for this one. Have thou in mind, Maeve, what thou dost reveal, what thou dost bring at Avelforth, which, by the way, could be anywhere. This place name research is equivalents in mostly all parts of England, so that could be literally anywhere. That never for flying ill did he yield up his life, since for him Maeve was ready for his eating. So we're starting to move into some of the slightly weirder things. This is another Latin plant used in Roman medicine, and another Mediterranean herb. Chamomile is Greek in origin, and it translates to earth apple. And we're starting to move into things that have got, the nine herb charm is interesting about the way it's written, because it's got sort of, it's obviously pagan, but it's got weird bits of Christianity chucked in there, and we're starting to see bits of that appearing. Chamomile in the modern day is used in hair care, skincare, herbal teas. I love chamomile tea at night, it's great. Perfumes and other cosmetics. This is one of the plants I grow in my allotment because it smells nice and you can just make tea from it. So it definitely grows here, which is nice. In the Leech Book 1, it's used for bruises and joint pain, and my favourite one, against evil, which is excellent. And in Leech Book 3, it's used against nocturnal goblin visitors. So you can make up what you want from that. It is not found on either of our archaeological sites, but again, it's another Mediterranean herb. So again, it might be grown in a different context than by the side of the road, and it's not classed as a weed because of that. Unlike our next plant, next slide please, which is of the friendly nettle, which I'm sure you all recognise. This plant is given a fantastic Old English name. This plant that Wurgel, I have no idea, is named. This did the seal sent forth from the high sea, a cure for the wrath of other venom. Okay, so again, fantastic Old English name. The nettle itself, very recognisable in the modern world. It's an invasive weed. This word could mean sting nettle, dead nettle, or red nettle, but again, grows literally everywhere, very invasive, likes poor soil, likes so roadside stuff again. Has a long history of being used in traditional medicine. You can eat it, you can make tea from it, you can make textiles from it. It's found both in on the Coppergate site and the Southampton site, both as small mineralized seeds, which is very interesting, but this stuff is everywhere, so it works that it was in the 8th century as well. In the Lacnunga, it's also used in a eye salve. It's used for headaches and for rashes and stitches. In the Leech Book 1, it's used for dog bites and inflammation, for smallpox, for shingles and bruises and the common cold. And in Leech Book 3, it's used for neck pain. Right, what time is it? I've got time. Let's do the rest of them. Cool, next one, please. I just have a little note on this, so saying that if I was running out of time, I could cut the talk here because these ones are interesting, but they're interesting. Right. Anyway, so the next plant is crab apple. There did apple and venom bring it about that she would never turn into the house. So this is where the manuscript splits off. The 9 herb charm actually ends at the last herb, which is interesting because it's not 9 herbs, it's only 7. We think maybe the copyists got it slightly wrong when they were copying it out, and it actually merges with the charm underneath it, which is the lay of 9 twigs of Woden. So we've moved into past our Christian and Saxony god stuff into Norse stuff as well. The manuscript's amazing, I'm telling you. So we've got a bit, but for this bit, we've got a bit of a shift into Latin plant names as well, just to add to the layers of weirdness, which probably shows some attempt of Christianization of the Norse stuff. The use of apple in northern European context has both Christian and pagan links as well. So it's interesting how this is the first plant on it. It's found in crab apple was found in Coppergate as seeds. And it's only found in the Lacnunga. There isn't any use for crab apple or any apple actually in any of the other manuscripts, which is interesting. So next slide, please. So then we've got the last 2 plants, 8 and 9, and I've mixed these together because of how they're set out in the manuscript. Chervil and fennel, great and mighty too, these herbs did the wise Lord create, holy in the heavens where he hung, he established and sent them into the 7 worlds, for poor and for rich and for all a remedy. So manuscriptly speaking, this is the end of the 9 herb charm, but it's actually in the middle of the next poem, which is weird, but that's what we're dealing with. So we'll deal with time first. It's an Anglo-Norman word in itself, so it might be slightly later in origin. It means leaves of joy, which is nice. Time is a herb, you can place it between pillows to aid sleep and apparently ward off nightmares. It's used for purifying rooms. It's not found on either one of our archaeological sites, but we seem to have hit a run of that, unfortunately. Again, it's a herb, not a weed. It's found in all 3 manuscripts. In Leech Book 1, it's used for headaches, for fever, and for the voice, apparently, as well. Leech Book 3, it's used for mouth pain and dry disease, and in the Lacnunga, it's used for herbal remedy or green salve, footache again, and against evil. And then we've got fennel. Fennel, again, is an old French word, which in turn comes from Latin. And actually apparently means hay, which I guess I can see that. Has an aniseedy taste and is used in culinary uses. I actually hate fennel, it's awful, but it's really pretty. It goes in my herb garden. It's, you know, it's beautiful, so I can see why people want to use it. In Leech Book 1, it's used for eye ache and chest ache and foot ache and poisons and devil possession and mental vacancy. In Leech Book 3, it's used for against elves and elf disease, against the devil, against being overlooked and being devil sick. And in the Lacnunga, it's also used as a holy salve. It's used for seizures and chest pain and coughs and charms against cattle. It's found actually in both Coppergate and Southampton. And what's interesting about this plant is that instead of it being just seeds or mineralized things, it's actual plant flower parts that were found. I think there was the top bit, whatever it's called, the middle bit, from the literature anyway, and which is nice because it means again that was found in waterlogged conditions. So cool. Right, next slide, please. So that is a very quick and crash course through all 9 of these charms, and we've actually just done the entire charm and the instructions about how to use it. So let's hit some conclusions. Can these plants be grown in the local climate of England in the early medieval period? Well, out of the 9 herbs, which 5 of them are found archaeologically on our 2 sites, which actually is, well, as that's over half, I'm going to go with yes, they can be grown in northern European climates. Of course, we'd want to widen how many archaeology sites I looked at for that, maybe add a monastic one or an actual one with some herbs on it as well, to see whether they actually were grown here and that. And are the texts and the plants in the Lacnunga part of an early medieval medical handbook or oddities to be enjoyed? So, due to the complicated nature of manuscript culture, the copying process and origins of texts and the translation process between the secular and vernacular languages, to be able to compare the results to physical evidence is very important in the study of flora in the early medieval period. When assessing the literature surrounding the manuscripts, the word oddity was used to describe the collections of remedies found, especially in the Lacnunga. This implies the information conveyed in the text with more folklore and fairy tales than serious medical evidence. The Lacnunga does have remedies that are used for diseases, but things such as elfin disease. The Bull's Leech Book and Leech Book 3 do have remedies that protect against the devil, but the majority of these remedies are for serious conditions ranging from headaches, toothaches, stomach aches, poisoning, cancer, and in Leech Book 3, even gynecological problems. It's entirely possible that some of the remedies are a collection because the compiler found them interesting without any thought for the use of the remedies. The collection of charm remedies in the Lacnunga is a good example of this. However, the majority of plants they describe are found locally. They're easy to grow, or they're weeds. Other studies have proven that they have individual properties, that the healing, for example, wild lettuce has sedative effects and can be used in eye salves. So to conclude, the study proved that the plants listed in these more questionable remedies do in themselves have medicinal properties and therefore are useful.